All right, I think I'll go ahead and get started. I'll leave the door open for now if people come in again, but if it starts to get loud in the hallway, Trisha, I point you to go grab the door for us, okay? All right, so thank you all for coming. My name is Lauren Meyer, your friendly neighborhood Tea Party Atheist, and I'm here today to clear up confusions and smash some stereotypes about atheists and about the Tea Party, and to explain how one person can have both of those bumper stickers. So I'm excited to talk with you all tonight, and I'm only going to give overviews of all the issues that I bring up because I really want to leave plenty of time at the end to get into more of a dialogue with your questions, because that'll help me tailor everything to your interests and your background level of knowledge and things like that. So first, I'd like to get a sense of who's here. I know probably about half of you, and there's a lot of new faces as well, which is great. So first, please raise your hand if you consider yourself an atheist, agnostic, skeptic, freethinker, humanist, pastafarian, anything like that. All right, cool. Now raise your hand if you politically fall somewhere along the lines of Tea Party, conservative, libertarian, Republican, constitutionalist, anything like that. All right, cool. So I didn't get a scan of every single person. Did anyone happen to raise your hand for both questions yet? One a little kinda, okay. So is anyone still like shocked out of your mind that it's possible to raise your hand for both of those questions? No, okay, that's good. So hopefully today we'll all learn something from one another and get a better idea of where we're coming from. Yep, go ahead. So I'm going to give away the punchline right up front. So does anyone know who this woman is? Yeah, Forrest? Ayn Rand? It is. It's Ayn Rand. Most famously known for authoring the novel Atlas Shrugged and developing the philosophy of objectivism. So here's the bottom line. Being an objectivist is what underlies both my atheism and my political views. Though Atlas continues to sell hundreds of thousands of copies every year, even though it's 57 years old, objectivists are still rare in our culture. So we frequently face misunderstandings at best. Come on in, there's plenty of room up front. And willful misrepresentations at worst, coming from all sides of political and philosophical debates. So I'm not going to try to convert anyone here to objectivism tonight. That would be nothing short of miraculous. But I do want you all to walk away with a better understanding of where people like me are coming from. Hit it. Now, have you ever tried having a political or religious discussion with someone and you just walk away exasperated because it seems like you're not even talking the same language as each other, right? Like just talking past one another. You're totally not alone in that experience. It's happened to me multiple times. Because even when we're not trying to change someone's mind, it's really frustrating to discuss these kinds of issues because it can seem like the other person just doesn't get it at all. I mean, you know they're a decently smart and reasonable person, so how can they not get your basic premise, like at all, right? So one issue is that we simply don't view the world the same way. So the economist and author Arnold Kling has developed a really interesting 3 axes model, he calls it, to explain how, did I say go yet? Go back. To explain how different ideologies can affect your view of the world and how you interpret everything. So in an essay in The American, he describes the positions like this. So the progressives myth revolves around the axis of oppression and the oppressed. Progressives see themselves as standing up for groups that were historically oppressed. They see conservatives and libertarians as contributing to the evil of oppression, either overtly or through indifference. I would add that many atheists see organized religion as an issue of oppressors and the oppressed too. So these axes go beyond politics. The conservatives' myth revolves around the axis of civilization and barbarism. Conservatives see themselves as standing up for the institutions and traditions that constrain man's barbarous instincts and preserve civilization. They see progressives and libertarians as contributing to the decline of civilization, either overtly or through indifference. And I'll also add that many religious people see atheism as a threat to civilization. So again, these frames of reference go beyond political issues. And finally, the libertarians' myth revolves around the axis of freedom and coercion. Libertarians see themselves as standing up for voluntary transactions and individual choice, and they view government interference as coercive. They see progressives and liberals as contributing to the expansion of government power at the expense of individual choice, either overtly or through indifference. Though I'm not strictly a libertarian, my lens does most closely resemble Kling's freedom and coercion axis. So if at any time tonight you find yourself scratching your head like, what is she talking about? I just don't understand where she's coming from. Try reframing it in your minds through the lens of freedom and coercion, and that might help get a better understanding of where I'm coming from. All right, go ahead. So now at this point, I want to ask if there's any pressing questions before I move on. For now, I only want to briefly address anything that might hinder your understanding throughout the rest of the talk, and we'll get to the good meaty questions later. But anything for now? Yeah.
When you speak of religion, are you talking Christianity only, or are you talking all religion?
I'm going to try most of the night to stay general and talk about religion in general, although most of my experience as an American is going to be with Christianity. So that's most of my reference point internally, but I think most of my points will apply in a broader sense too. Anything else for now? Yeah.
What about other sources of, you talk about government, oppressors, freedom, coercion. Do you look at other sources of things like, for instance, corporations that are as big as governments now?
Yeah, so those axes can definitely apply to other things beyond government. So other entities like corporations can be seen as oppressed and oppressors, or as freedom and coercion by different people. So yeah, it could definitely apply. Anything else for now? Okay. Go ahead. So first now I'm going to talk about how I can be godless without being a liberal. Two words that usually paired together, right? So let's start by all listing together a bunch of stereotypes or myths or mistaken views that you've heard or maybe even think yourself about atheists. Just shout them out, raise your hand, I don't care.
Tardy.
What was that? Sorry? I didn't hear, I'm sorry. Oh, tardy, yes. Way to go, John. Immoral, good.
You talking about John still?
Sure. How about they're all Satanists? That's a common one.
No, that would be a religion. Yeah.
Right? I'm not saying these things are true. I'm saying stereotypes or myths that are out there in the culture that you've maybe had to deal with or encountered. It's selfish, okay. Baby eating, that's a common one. On the internet, it's a thing. What else? Marxists, good. All right, so I have a few more. They're just mad at God, right? Or they have a God-shaped hole in their heart. It's just a phase. They're just rebelling. They all hate all religious people. Militant atheists. All right. So those are a lot of things that are floating out there. But here's what being an atheist actually entails. Lack of belief in God. That's it, right? So people can be atheists for all different kinds of reasons. I'll get to in just a sec. And they can think differently about all different kinds of issues. Quick question, yeah?
You said didn't believe in God.
Correct?
What God?
Any gods.
Theist God.
Any theistic kind of God. So, right, the Christian God, the Hindu gods, any god. That's another issue. We'll talk about that at the end. But I'm kind of with you there. All right. So like any group, you can make some generalizations about atheists based on demographic kind of factors. But like any generalizations, then, they're not going to tell you the whole story. So, for example, it is accurate to say that most atheists are men on a national scale. But there are many, many, many women who are proud atheists too. And it's also accurate to say that a majority of atheists are liberals, Democrats, progressives, things on that line. So here, I can't even claim that there's a sizable minority of conservative atheists, because there's not. We're few and far between. Otherwise, I wouldn't have felt it necessary to give this talk today, right? But we're out there. So, because again, being an atheist doesn't necessitate being on the left politically. All it means is you don't believe in any gods. Go ahead. So, just in case anyone's doubting my atheist chops here, here I am with Christopher Hitchens, very famous atheist, getting him to sign my copy of God is Not Great after he gave a talk at my college. And as a co-organizer of his visit, I got to drive him back to the airport afterwards, for which I got a kiss, no big deal. All right, so why am I an atheist? I believe in using reason in all aspects of life, and that rationality and faith are antithetical. The burden of proof for the existence of a God falls on those who are making the positive claim that there is one. So, lacking any credible evidence, the rational position is one of disbelief. So, thinking back to the different axes that we mentioned before of how people view the world, I'm not an atheist just because I think organized religion is a matter of oppression, though I happen to think that's true. And I'm not trying to break down civilization. I just think that the supernatural is irrational, and therefore don't subscribe to any belief in gods. Aside from co-organizing the Christopher Hitchens visit during my undergrad years, I haven't been all that active in any kind of atheist movement or groups until recently. But since moving to Montana last June, I've become very involved here in the, oh, hi, welcome. No problem. In the Missoula Area Secular Society, MASS. And a lot of familiar faces here from that. And it's a mostly social group with events like Sunday brunches, skeptics in the pub, summer picnics, stuff like that. Lots of community building. But there's also a monthly book club, which I skip, and a monthly discussion group, which I faithfully attend. And we talk about all kinds of issues of potential interest to atheists, from science to philosophy. And I usually enjoy throwing a wrench into the discussions by frequently being the voice of dissent, as Bob, the discussion leader, might be able to attest to. No, stay. For me, atheism isn't completely devoid of political implications. So for instance, lacking any adherence to a religion means I completely support marriage equality, other gay rights, I'm pro-choice, I think it's inappropriate for the government to be involved in religion in any way. And these are all positions typically associated with the left. So you can see why it's an easy leap for many atheists to continue in that vein of thinking for other issues too. But as you know already, I don't. So now I'll switch gears, go ahead, to talk about how I can be on the right without being religious. Again, let's list some stereotypes together, or myths, that we've heard about the Tea Party. So getting us started ball rolling, it's all rich old white men, right? What else have we heard?
Enemy of the state.
Enemy of the state, yeah, anti-government. Forest, sorry? Terrorists, yeah, forest. Racist. What else? Sorry? Misinformed. Misinforming. I heard one in the back that I kind of... Tax evaders, okay. Anything else? Some other common ones, they all hate the poor, just bigots in general, anti-science, closed-minded, that kind of thing. So it's much harder to define the Tea Party than it is to define atheism. So the first really, really important thing to know is there's no such thing as the Tea Party, okay? So there are a few national organizations like Americans for Prosperity, Tea Party Express, and they like to use that label of the Tea Party, and they get a lot of national attention. But the majority of Tea Party groups are grassroots organizations that are run on a really local level. So everyone is different and stands for different things, which is part of what makes it hard to pin down a concise definition. But the common threads are fiscal conservatism and limiting the scope of the federal government. So yes, some Tea Party groups focus on issues like gay marriage or prayer in schools, but that's not at all what the main point of the movement is. It's really about things like balancing the federal budget, or at least minimizing the deficit, reducing the national debt, and rolling back onerous regulations and taxes. So the movement's name started as a nod to the Boston Tea Party, and has since been given the backronym taxed enough already. Go ahead. So again, to prove my conservative chops now, here I am at a Romney-Ryan rally. And this was the second time that I had the pleasure of seeing them speak in person. So yeah, being from the swing state of Wisconsin has some benefits come election season if you're into politics. So why am I a Tea Partier? I believe the only legitimate purpose of government is to protect individuals from force, and I value individual rights, including property rights. So that means I think people should be able to keep the results of their own productive efforts and use their resources however they see fit. So all relationships and trade should be strictly voluntary. So government plans that expropriate wealth from one group to give benefits to another are immoral. Therefore, the most accurate, precise political label for me is a laissez-faire capitalist. No, stay. He's my husband. I'm allowed to be tough on him. Now here's another common misconception that needs to be cleared up. America today is not a capitalist country. And we haven't been for some time. Rather, we have a mixed economy. We retain some aspects of capitalism, but there's a large degree of government control and involvement in our economy. So what we're left with instead is cronyism, where political influence largely determines success. So as someone who advocates for genuine capitalism, I hate things like tax loopholes and bailouts that reward the connected. Instead, I favor free markets that allow people to interact and trade voluntarily. So my main reason for being a fiscal conservative is that I think it's the morally correct position that respects individual rights. However, I also believe that true capitalism is the political system that results in the greatest practical benefits in terms of generating wealth and raising a society's standard of living. And history shows that freer countries are more prosperous. So I've long been involved in the Tea Party movement. Back when I lived in Wisconsin, I was a member of a group called We the People of the Republic. That's the shirt. The back is the Gadsden flag. For many years, I was part of that group, and in fact, I'm still the chair of one of the committees. And here, I'm involved, I'm a member of the Five Valleys Pachyderm Club and Missoula Republican Women. And I'm also involved with the Montana GOP, Missoula Republican Party, and a few campaigns already. So meetings of these groups usually begin with the pledge. I recite the pre-1954 version. So I just pause silently during the under God bit. And then this is usually followed by an invocation, during which I just stand there silently, and I try to peek at, if anyone else isn't bowing their heads, we can, share a glance together sometimes. And there's also a local Tea Party group here in Missoula called Missoula Patriots. I attended a few of their meetings and events, but have since not really been involved with that particular group because they're too religious and socially conservative for my tastes. But again, this further illustrates the wide diversity that exists among Tea Party groups. My group that I was in Wisconsin that was specifically a Tea Party group was absolutely not like that. Here it is, so there's differences. So here I'm actually much more involved with officially Republican things rather than specifically Tea Party things. Go ahead. All right, so let's take stock of what we've covered tonight. People's ideologies can color how they see the world. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where a political or religious conversation is just not going anywhere and you just don't seem to get each other and you're talking past one another, try interpreting the issue from another frame of reference, and it might make it easier for you to get one another. All it means to be an atheist is that you don't believe in any gods. I'm an atheist because I believe in the importance of rationality, and I don't think it's possible to reconcile faith and reason. The main tenets of the Tea Party movement are fiscal conservatism and a limited federal government. I'm a Tea Partier because I believe in individual rights, and I don't think the government should be involved in anything beyond protecting us from force. Both my religious and political views are upheld by my underlying philosophy of objectivism, developed by Ayn Rand and illustrated in the novel Atlas Shrugged. To throw out some potential fodder for the upcoming Q&A section, being an objectivist means I'm proudly selfish and I reject altruism. Go ahead. So thank you again for taking the time to come out tonight. I especially want to thank my friend, Brian Tutt, for helping record my talk. Let's give him a hand, everybody. Thank you, Brian. I hope you all learned something new and perhaps gained a greater understanding of the other side by listening to someone on both sides. Being open to working with people of diverse opinions is really essential for success in today's political landscape. For instance, atheists often care very deeply about freedom of speech and other First Amendment issues. Guess what? People like me do too. And many issues cross traditional political boundaries now. So stuff like Common Core state standards and the recent revelations about the NSA's Fourth Amendment breaches, they're important to people of all political stripes. So if you've already written off or demonized or insulted the other group of people with whom you disagree on some or even most things, you could be missing out on potential allies that would be important on other things on which you do agree. So now I'm happy to take your questions. A few notes. One, please refrain from making long statements that are disguised as questions where you tack on like a "don't you agree" or "what do you think about that" at the end. And also note that using the vulgar nickname for Tea Partiers would just reflect poorly on you. Okay? So, open for questions now. Tricia.
Have you ever gotten any super negative reactions when people find out that you're a member of both?
Yes. So I haven't had any like really negative things to my face. A common, I'll get to you next. A common thing is that people are more just surprised than anything, like, say what? How can that be? Or like mildly negative things, like, but you're so smart. Yeah, thanks. I've gotten a lot more strongly negative things from people online, because it's easier, I think, than saying something mean to someone's face. But I have a pretty thick skin, I guess, otherwise I wouldn't be up here. So usually I let it roll off. Yeah.
I agree. I think it's prudent to recognize every new
My
ally.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good thing. I wonder if you've experienced, or really my question is, why it's worth it to you to use the title of Tea Party, even though what I think the core of, just correct me if I'm wrong, the core of what you stand for is fiscal conservatism. And there was one other, could you repeat it for me?
Limiting the scope of the federal government.
So I'm wondering why, because obviously if you attach the Tea Party label to yourself, you're going to cause some tension that if your core message is those two things, that you might not necessarily need to tag that on, that baggage.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what is it about the Tea Party name or movement or organization, set of organizations that makes it worth it for you to present yourself as a Tea Party rather than someone who specifically stands for fiscal conservatism, at the limited scope of what you stand for?
Great question, and I'll repeat it quick just in case the mic didn't pick it up very well. Basically, the question was about why I choose to use the Tea Party label instead of something more descriptive, like just saying fiscally conservative or something like that, when using the Tea Party label might provoke more negative reactions that distance people from me that might otherwise work with me on stuff. One really important reason is I think words are really important. So I don't want to shy away from something because of what people who don't know what they're talking about think about it. So another really good example for me is capitalism. I think it's a really important word that we retain and teach as many people as we can about what capitalism actually means, rather than giving up the word capitalism to those who think it's the same as cronyism or mixed economy kinds of things, because that's just giving up ground to me is a big part of it. What?
To give you more light.
Okay. Another thing is my experience with the Tea Party has been an almost completely positive one, especially for the majority of the years that I've been involved. So the We the People of the Republic group in Wisconsin that I was part of was all about fiscal issues and limiting the scope of the federal government. We didn't touch on anything else that I wouldn't be proud to put my name behind. So I felt absolutely no reason to avoid using that label, because to me it was perfectly descriptive. We were a Tea Party group, that's what we did, that's what I believe in, good to go. And so coming here, where the local one in our immediate area is a little different, that doesn't mean I want to shed the label, because I'm certainly not a Republican either, and that's now the most groups that I work with. So for me, it still has utility as a descriptor, and I'd rather take the chance to educate someone about what Tea Party actually means, rather than running from the potential stereotype. You were next.
I think you've misdefined Tea Party,
Okay,
and I'm actually in it.
okay,
And I spent 5 years doing this, or 6, however long our current president has been elected, but didn't understand it, so I looked into it. And what I think it boils down to is self-ownership.
okay,
That they believe in self-ownership. They believe they own their life. Whereas if you're looking at our society today, you don't own your life. And all they want to do is be left alone and to have people stop stealing. That's all they want.
absolutely.
Take care of themselves, are qualified to do it, they're responsible, they can do it, and they believe everybody else can do it too.
Absolutely. So to repeat, in case the mic didn't catch it up for the future, his point was basically he has a different kind of definition of what the Tea Party means, more about self-reliance and
It's self-ownership.
self-ownership.
You own your life.
Right, you own your own life, and you don't need interference from the government or anyone else to tell you what to do, basically. And that's something I also completely subscribe to. Oh, you're not going back now? Please go back. Grr. Yep. I will too. And that's something I completely agree with. And you're right that that is another whole aspect of the Tea Party that I didn't touch on as much during my talk. But that's all of what this guy's about, right, is owning your own life. I didn't choose to describe the Tea Party that way this time because to me, for people who don't already agree with that position, it's harder to understand. So saying something like minimizing the deficit, reducing the debt, decreasing taxes, those are like concrete things that are easier to grasp, I think. So those are and they're more like action or issues-oriented pieces of it. But that whole other side is definitely a part of it for a lot of people. And that's why things like gun rights are also really popular among the Tea Party. It's not a fiscally conservative issue, but it's still a own your own life kind of issue. So the question about how is that different from libertarianism, that's a complicated, like technical kind of question to me. It's really close to the political philosophy of libertarianism, but a lot of Tea Party people don't want to use the libertarian label because the official Libertarian Party, as a political party, is pro-life, for instance, or is pro-choice, for instance, and a lot of Tea Party people aren't, so they don't want to use a libertarian label, things like that. And there's other issues. And just in general, most, but not all, Tea Party groups are trying to work through and or within the Republican Party. So they don't want to use the libertarian label for that reason. For me personally, I don't use that label because it's a political party, which I don't agree with everything on, and because they don't have a philosophy of why they're libertarian, whereas as an objectivist, I do. So if that's still unclear, we can circle back to it later maybe, but for now, new questions? Go ahead, Peter. I'll get you next.
Do you think that the Tea Party is the beginning of a long-term presence in American politics that might split up this entrenched dichotomy between the only two that anybody ever pays attention to? The libertarians are kind of out there in the front.
Right.
From most people's perspective. One, do you see this long-term entrenchment of two powerful ideological parties as being definite? And do you think that the Tea Party may be something to help break that?
Yeah, so the question basically is, do I see the Tea Party movement as a long-term presence or trend in American politics? And my short answer is that I hope so. A little more involved, I would say, I think it's already had a lot more staying power than everyone had predicted. Because every few months still, you see articles like, the Tea Party's dead, the Tea Party's dying, and we're always still like, nope. So I think it's already outlived just about everyone's predictions. We haven't gotten bored and given up yet. I think, at least for the foreseeable, medium term, I think it will continue to be a big player, continue putting pressure on Republicans to put up certain kinds of Republican candidates. I don't think it's going to blossom into a third party kind of situation that's like an actual viable third party. But I think there's at least medium-term potential, and even if the movement by name kind of drops out, I think a lot of the principles and ideals will carry on. Go ahead.
The scope of your generalizations somewhat overwhelm me, and there's a lot of contradiction in what you said. I don't understand why being an atheist detracts or adds to what I perceive as the need of the conservative movement. I agree with this gentleman back here. I challenge you that the Tea Party was actually a name given to a group of people who've been around a heck of a long time, clear back in my time to Goldwater and beyond, that we want a conservative government. And so the term Tea Party came about and that's why you can't form us into a government, because most of us are Republican and most of us understand that we can't get anything accomplished like the Libertarians, which have some excellent points. So currently the Republicans have a majority in the House because of, quote, the Tea Party movement. And it's going to be interesting to see whether or not the Tea Party movement withstands the attack from basically the progressive Democrats and the liberals, which you associate with your lack of religion. Now, why do you refer to moral and immoral in your speech? What's the basis of your morals? What is the basis of your lack of morals? And how do you prove there's not a God?
All right, so that was a whole lot rolled into one. In what I
You've got 45
tried to caution
minutes,
against,
so you have three.
it's my presentation. So I'm only going to address part at the end that I feel is worth addressing. So one of the common stereotypes of atheists was brought up about how they are immoral or lack a basis for morality.
I said, I asked, how do you use those words? What's the form of those words? What makes something immoral?
Where do you get your morality from?
Okay.
What's the basis of your morality? This guy's smarter than I am.
All right. So about where the basis of my morality comes from. The basis of my morality comes from a belief in, how do I want to phrase this? In the value of man's life and man's happiness as its own end. It's not man does not exist on earth to serve or worship God. Man does not exist on earth to serve or benefit others. He exists on earth to serve and benefit himself. And that is a worthy means, or that is a worthy end. And that arises from the innate value of man's rational mind. So from there is where I draw things like individual rights, including property rights, because the individual human is a valid end. Does that make sense?
So, following up,
Okay, one short thing and then someone else.
following up, you're not the first atheist that I've known in my 74 years. I'm a little bit amazed. This is not what I thought I was going to learn when I came here. I'm a conservative. I use the Tea Party as a means of doing that. And evidently you're a conservative and you're using the Tea Party.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow, I don't care that you're an atheist.
Good.
So but do you care what I am?
So his follow-up was, he's a conservative, he uses the Tea Party for his own political benefits as well, but he doesn't really care that I'm an atheist. Why?
Political benefit.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. But so he doesn't really care that I'm an atheist because that seems tangential to the issue, right?
No, it's your issue.
Right. So, and I think that's great, actually. And part of my whole point is that it shouldn't really matter. If we agree on a lot of conservative principles, we should absolutely work together. I shouldn't really care about your religious beliefs as long as they're not interfering with anyone else's individual rights. You shouldn't really care about my atheism. We should be able to work together in harmony, and it should be great. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't always work like that. A lot of Tea Party people who I have plenty of experience working with openly say they wouldn't want to work with an atheist because, that's working with the devil, so can't have that. Or even something more innocuous, just that they wouldn't think it's possible to work with an atheist. So if you hear first maybe that someone's an atheist, you would immediately put up that blockade okay, we're not working together anymore. and you would miss out on potential opportunities. Same goes the other direction too. If I'm an atheist working on specifically atheist-influenced kind of issues, like gay rights or pro-choice or no prayer in schools or whatever, it shouldn't matter that in my other politics I'm conservative, because we should be able to work together on the things on which we do agree. But many atheists will, once they hear conservative or Tea Party or anything like that, put up that same wall. We can't work together. We must not agree on anything. You're out of my picture. So my point wasn't that it should matter or be a big deal that I'm a Tea Party atheist. My point is that kind of it shouldn't. So, Christiana.
Well, I was just going to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought kind of one of the reasons why you're doing this is you have friends from sort of both
Right.
sides, and you wanted to show each group how these beliefs can work together or aren't related, right?
Right.
That's kind of
Yeah, and that's, she brought up that another of my points or goals in having this presentation was I have a lot of friends from MASS, the Missoula Area Secular Society, and I have a lot of friends from Pachyderm and Republican Women and the Montana GOP, and I want to show that y'all can sit together, and I can go on Saturday to Montana GOP voter training, and I can go on Sunday to Heathen Handiwork, our little craft circle for the atheist group, and feel at home in both groups. So yeah, here's another question in the back.
I feel bad because
Oh, you're hiding behind Nick's head. Go for it. Thank you.
I'm not sure this is relevant, but I assume that you are on the freedom and coercion scale.
Yes.
Later you mentioned that you would say the pledge, a modified version. My opinion is that the pledge would be coercion. Is that not your opinion?
So the question was about how I seem to be on the freedom versus coercion axis, but I also mentioned that I say the pledge, and the pledge is potentially could be seen as coercion. So my answer for that is I think anytime the pledge is mandated, it's absolutely coercion. But if it's just at a meeting or something and people are asked, you know, stand up, pay your respects, say it if you want to, kind of a thing, like I voluntarily, gladly say the pledge. I do pledge allegiance to America, etc. So to me, it's a voluntary choice to say the pledge, so it doesn't fall under the category of coercion. Nick.
Yeah, my question is actually for you as a laissez-faire capitalist.
Okay.
In the 21st century, most industrialized nations have a mixed economy,
Mm-hmm.
and where we see true capitalism, or the more traditional capitalism, is in pre-industrialized nations. How do you believe that more traditional capitalism can lead the United States to thrive?
So the question was about how today countries that are more traditionally or strictly capitalist are pre-industrialized, and how I think that is kind of reconciled with my beliefs. But I actually, do you have any examples in mind? Because
Ethiopia, they don't have a corrupt government. A lot of pre-industrialized nations have a warlord system where it's tied up. But in Ethiopia, they currently don't have a warlord system. They have a market system where people make stuff for the market, or they have a trade and are able to either barter or make money in that way. A similar system is found in Ecuador, where a lot of the government corruption over the past 30 years has decreased.
okay.
And they're able to use the trades that they have to make money in a traditional savings.
Okay. So we brought up the examples of Ethiopia and Ecuador. And I will confess off the bat, I'm not an expert on either of those two countries' current situations or anything. But what I can say from what I know is capitalism is more than just the ability to trade in a market. And I mean in that time, like a physical open air market or something. Capitalism also requires an objective rule of law. And that entails governments that protect property rights and governments that protect people from force. And I know you mentioned that they currently don't have, I think you use like a warlord system or something.
And they could slip tomorrow into a warlord system.
Right.
Again.
Right. So a lot of that, I think, is because there's still not rule of law or respect for objective law. Another thing is any true capitalism that actually exists there is new. So the beneficial effects haven't really started to compound yet, and new can still mean decades, because it takes a while for producers to believe that, hey, we actually do have the ability to produce such and such, and kind of get the ball rolling. So because I'm not an expert on that, I'm going to move on for now, but maybe we can talk more after. Go ahead.
We keep talking about capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
That's a Marxist term.
I heart capitalism. It's my button.
That's a Marxist term, pro-Marxist term for the free market.
Originally, yeah.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And to say capitalism brings up certain connotations that are bad. If you use the word free market or the natural state of man or something like that, that would be a much more descriptive term of what capitalism is. And I mean, it's a philosophy, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's the economics of a philosophy, and it's the economics of self-ownership.
Yeah.
And you take capitalism, it's been framed and branded by its opponent, which would be a Marxist state. And so people view it that way because that's the way it's been framed. But capitalism is not that at all. In fact, there's a booklet out called iPencil.
I don't know that one.
Capitalism really, really well. It's very short, very easy reading. Leonard Reed, and it's great.
I'll have to distribute them.
Because it's a society that operates in the absence of government, and it does it very, very well.
There's a critical thing, actually. So capitalism is not a society that operates in the absence of government. That's anarchy, right? And capitalism actually requires government that protects individuals from force. Okay, so that's cleared up.
If everybody was a capitalist, you wouldn't need that force. But because some people out there aren't capitalists, then you need to protect and defend yourself. You're right.
Yeah.
Would you address rule of
Oh, sorry, sir, please wait until after. I'm still up front. Crap, what was I going to say? What the question was about? Oh, so it's a similar answer to why I still choose to use the label, the word capitalism, to describe what I believe, as to the earlier gentleman's question about why I choose to use the label Tea Party, even though that might, for some people, bring up negative connotations or misunderstandings. So, yes, free market economy might be more descriptive, and I use that too, absolutely. I just don't want to, again, do away with the label of capitalism or let misunderstandings of what it means define what it means. So to me, it's important to retain that and educate people about the differences between capitalism and cronyism and what have you. yeah, I don't want to repeat myself too much. Yes?
You said there was no room in your life for altruism.
Yes. Great question. So that's a word that objectivists use in a different way than most people understand it. So altruism, to me, does not just mean being nice to people or helping people out or whatever. I give a lot of my tiny, tiny income to charity. I help people do things for free all the time. But that's because I determine with my own rational decision that there's some value in it for me. Because I get the pleasure or satisfaction of helping a friend, or I donate to charities that I think make the world a better place that I want to live in, or I am nice to people because it's just the decent thing to do, and they're nicer to me then too. So none of those kinds of things are altruism. To me, that's just the good kind of selfishness. Actual altruism means sacrificing something that's a higher value for yourself to something that's a lower value to yourself because it's a higher value to someone else. And to me, that is wrong because it's not upholding the idea of my own life and my own happiness as a valid end. Right. I mean, anything voluntary or that I determine is in my own benefit, that's not altruism anymore. That takes it to a different realm. Yeah.
I'm going to revert back to the importance of words,
Okay.
brand names, and association. I think I would like to challenge people. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I would like to
That's okay.
challenge people to speak specifically about the issues that concern them or that they think they can find agreement on with individuals that they work with, because there's two ways of viewing this sort of conundrum where we've got a confusion of labels or a disassociation with labels. One of the ways to look at it is that it's an accident. We accidentally associate things, and for that reason we don't want to work with, for example, a Christian or an atheist, even though we both support education reform, or whatever it might be that we put together. The other way of looking at this is that these brand names are actually created for you. They are created as a system for you to be divided, literally. And that is the whole idea of there being a Republican Party, there being a Democrat, Libertarian, Tea Party. It doesn't matter what you call it. We all agree on certain things. We all agree on certain humanitarian concepts. But if we introduce ourselves as Tea Partyers or Republicans or anything like that, we're going to carry a lot of baggage that we shouldn't be bringing to the table. So I would just like to challenge you all to talk with specific issues, because you'll find a lot more agreeableness, and I think we'll make a lot more progress than if we arbitrarily attach these, of course, these names that carry a lot of baggage. So that's all. I think these names are designed to be you. They are promoted in the news so that you will be proud about them and happy about them. Rather than, an example is equality.
All right. Sorry, I'm gonna cut you off. Sorry. Okay. So the point was about how labels, and going back to the issue of words, can be seen kind of in two ways. One is, it's just an accident and it glosses over things, so you can work past that and work together and things. And the other is kind of that, the media or some other groups like that kind of make these labels for us. So it's better to stay concretized and talk about specifics, because we'll find we have more common ground than if we use divisive labels. And I kind of agree with that in a lot of ways. I think a lot of times it's a lot more productive to talk about concretes and talk about specific issues. And you will find that you have more common ground with people than you expected or would have guessed based on a label. But I still maintain that there is utility in the label as well, as long as everyone understands that it's shorthand and that your definition of it might not be the same as someone else's, and you don't know everything about someone because they used the label Tea Party or capitalist or whatever. But I think it's still important to retain the ability to use the labels without getting shut out. So, okay, that's all I'm going to say on that specific issue for now, but other questions? Sorry, just real quick. Anyone else who hasn't had a chance to talk yet tonight?
I have a question.
Okay.
You might have to answer some other point in time.
Okay. We have the room till 8:30, so I'll be here
As far as
if you guys want.
political stance, I mean, there's a continuum between, say, communism and, complete anarchy. You've drawn a line between there somewhere, and where do you draw the line, and why did you draw it there?
So Forrest brought up the issue of a continuum between basically communism and anarchy. And where do I draw the line in between? Because I did already make the point that I'm not an anarchist. I think a really important first thing is I throw away that continuum in the first place. I don't think it's the right way to think about things as communism and anarchy being opposites. I actually think that anarchy is a lot closer to communism than other things are. And I'm floundering at the best way to explain it right now, so it might not be super clear. But basically, anarchy is rule by force, okay? If there's not an objective government in place.
Anarchy is, in my mind, it's lawless.
Right, exactly. And lawlessness is rule by force.
Anarchy is society in the absence of government.
Yep,
That's anarchy.
yeah. And
There's
that,
another definition, which is the one you said. There's polar opposite. Lawlessness is polar opposite from anarchy.
okay, well, you two can hash that out later. But to me,
There would be a lot of beer involved in that kind of.
exactly. To me, anarchy means that there's no government, so there's no laws.
So that's laissez-faire.
No. Yeah, well, kind of. Okay, getting all over the place. I need to take a breath. Okay, so anarchy, because there's no government in place and because there's no laws in place, leads to a situation of the people or the groups that have the most physical power, is what it comes down to, are the ones that win. So it's still rule by force. And it might not be an officially recognized governmental kind of rule, but it's still rule by force. And to me, communism is also a form of rule by force. Therefore, anarchy and communism are a lot closer together than people usually think. Capitalism, on the other hand, requires a government with objective laws to protect individual rights. So I, first of all, reject the continuum of what traditionally people think of as left-right. So there's not really that kind of line for me to draw in the middle somewhere. Rather, I draw my line at what I think the proper scope and purpose of the government is, which is to protect individual rights, which stems from my philosophy of objectivism. So a government's required for certain kinds of activities, like a police and a military force, but not for other activities, like welfare or the EPA. Okay. Yeah, in the back.
So, I have a question about in terms of, well, you don't agree with welfare, is what I'm gathering?
Yes.
So if you were to become disabled, say you worked for 20 years and you were to become disabled, you then, under your philosophy, you would not then seek any assistance, whether it was medical or anything that the government might be able to provide? Would you refuse that sort of assistance?
Good question. So the question was about, so I don't believe in welfare, I just brought up. So if I were to become sick or disabled or something, would I refuse government assistance, basically? And this is a really common thing that gets thrown around about Ayn Rand. So I'll cover that first. So people love to throw out the fact that Ayn Rand collected Social Security. Love to throw that one out. But they rarely understand her justification of why she chose to under the circumstances. So she viewed it, and I would view Social Security as a form of restitution, basically. So if you've paid into the system through your taxes throughout your life, you are entitled to some of that money back in the form of taking your Social Security check that is due to you. So in the current system that we have, yes, it would be appropriate to take it so long as you denounce it at the same time. If we were in a different situation, and that hadn't have been the case in our country's political history, and you hadn't paid into the system throughout your life with your taxes or whatever, yeah, I wouldn't want to start a kind of system like Social Security or anything like that. More moving on to welfare, or if I become disabled or something, would I take it? Right now, it would kind of depend for me. I'm kind of in a middle situation. I'm 25, so I've only been working for like 9 years, so I haven't paid into the system that much. So I don't know right now if I would take it. It would depend on an individual case-by-case basis of whether I would take certain forms of government assistance. Another thing in general, though, is, I just had it. Hold on. I don't know. It's gone. Maybe it'll come back to me. Is that it generally? Okay.
Can I ask a more general version of the same question?
Sure.
Okay, do you not see a potential use of a government to be providing generally useful services for people, paid for by the taxes that they pay in? Not just healthcare, but like interstate highway systems and standing army, I mean, all of these things. Universal healthcare, those all are generally government services paid for by the taxpayers of mankind. Do you think that governments should not provide services? Period.
So the question was,
Hopefully the answer is no, so this...
well, the answer is kind of. So the question was about whether I think there's a place for government to provide services in general, not just welfare, the issue I was just talking about, but infrastructure, army, healthcare, other things that he brought up. So the answer is kind of, because the government should provide some services, but not most of the ones that it does now. Okay, so the some services that I think are covered under the scope of a proper government are things like a police force and an army, things like that that protect individual rights from force, courts system. The kinds of services that our government currently provides, which I think aren't appropriate, beyond the obvious things like welfare or Social Security would be stuff like bridges or the EPA or the FDA or federalized public education or 99% of what the government does. So mostly no, but a little bit yes.
How about FEMA?
Federal emergency.
So like when there's a disaster in a certain area of the country, like say Katrina, should the government just say, okay, go about it your own way, or bring in help?
So the question was about FEMA in instances like Katrina. And yeah, I think the government should not be involved in that. If it were left to free market forces to decide, a lot fewer people would live in places like New Orleans because they would have to bear more of the real costs of doing so, which are hidden because they're subsidized by the whole rest of the country. And I'm not trying to just pick on New Orleans. In my home state of Wisconsin, a common thing that FEMA would come in for would be tornadoes. So I'm not just saying like, don't live there, live anywhere else. Because, you know, you shouldn't live where all the tornadoes are either. That's pretty stupid. Yeah, we're on top of a super volcano. Awesome, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, so I think absent government interference, we would see more clearly the real costs and benefits of a lot of activities, including living in certain places, which FEMA would cover. Okay, next question. Whoever deems that it would be in their own self-interest to do so because they think it would be useful for themselves, potentially able to generate a profit from other users, etc.
So bridges should basically be barriers, not
Toll bridges, you'd have to have coins everywhere you went.
There's iPasses. If you don't have an iPass, come on.
I ride a bike.
Yeah, bridges should be private. That's a concretization. Anything else? Mm-hmm.
I'd like to take you to the future.
Let's go.
Okay. Labels have been a recent thing in my life.
Okay.
Maybe the last half or 1/3 as I hear labels. And in a lot of our talk today, we have a constitution that lays out how we can collectively benefit ourselves, which I'll call society. Given your statement on your beliefs, currently, if you go in some Muslim countries, Christians are being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in other countries, Muslims are being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
In my lifetime, the Jews were attacked.
Mm-hmm.
It would appear, in my fear, is that as we go forward in the future, and if the current trend in government seems to mimic 1935 Germany, do you, as a young person, have any anxieties that your beliefs may be isolated and attacked by some socialist group in place that deems that you're no longer desirable?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you feel
No, I
that
do.
as
Yeah.
in your belief structure?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. I haven't actually read it. It's on my long, long list of to read, but I really, really recommend that you read a book called The Ominous Parallels, and it's about how trends in American government today are really similar to the times that you brought up in Nazi Germany. And it's written by an objectivist who I trust, so I feel safe in recommending the book, even though I haven't read it personally. So you should read that book. And yeah, I do fear that people who believe like me are in some danger in some sense. I mean, we know the IRS is targeting conservative and Tea Party groups. We know the NSA is targeting conservative and Tea Party groups. There's a lot of signs that point to trouble, but that doesn't mean I'm going to shut up. So good luck trying.
I thought he was talking about atheism.
Oh, that too. Oh. See, I took it in the other way. Sure, atheists, I don't feel as much danger, I guess, in the atheist label as I do in the Tea Party label, because that is an uprising trend in our society. There's still plenty of vocal opposition to atheism that I face, but I think those are the dying cries of helplessness felt by people on the other end of an irreversible trend. So, yeah.
2 quick questions with lengthy answers, perhaps.
Okay, I'm good at those.
Individual rights, where do they come from? And what complaint, well, the atheist, what would you have with the 10 Commandments? At least 7 of them are pretty good for everybody.
Okay, so where do individual rights come from? And as an atheist, how do I feel about the 10 Commandments? So individual rights, for me, again, and it's going to be a similar answer to the one before, so I'm going to try not to repeat myself too much, come from the belief that every man as an individual is an end unto himself, and that he has a right to his own life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. And therefore, the only way to achieve those goals is through a system that protects individual rights. Further, individual rights is redundant because the only kind of rights are individual rights, because there's no such thing as group rights, because groups are a collection of individuals which have their own individual rights. Sorry, that was a little tangential. What was the second part? 10 Commandments. So I will say I could not list to you the 10 Commandments right now. I grew up as an atheist, so I'm not one of the people who was deconverted afterwards. So I was never taught them in Sunday school or anything. But I have watched a George Carlin skit in my life. So I would highly recommend watching the George Carlin skit on YouTube, where he goes through all the 10 Commandments and kind of just decimates them point by point. And the ones that are good in any way, to me, are good because they're individual rights issues, like not killing people. Good one. But things like respecting your parents if they deserve it, right? I think if they deserve it, but just because they're your parents or something, no. So I think a lot of the 10 Commandments in that way are not valid.
I would think the part about coveting your neighbor's goods would be antithetical to capitalism, because coveting things leads to people wanting them and going out and buying them.
So she brought up the issue of the not coveting your neighbor's stuff or wife and that kind of thing, being anti-capitalistic. From the little biblical history I know, covet means different things now than it did in the original, especially after many iterative translations and things. So I think it is perfectly fine and good to want something you don't have that your neighbor might have, and that can help you strive for greater things and be more productive and reach towards a goal. But covet in the terms of spite and disliking your neighbor because he has things that you don't, that's not good, because that's just disliking the good, which is production and value and things like that. What? Yeah, irrationally. So coveting is kind of good in that it makes you strive for a goal, but not if it's in the sense of hating people for having what they have. John, you haven't said anything in a while.
So you say you're in favor of individual rights.
Yeah.
But you specifically listed the EPA as one thing that you are opposed to.
Yeah, I did.
So how would you put yourself in a position, or how would you answer a question of one person's individual right to clean drinking water that hasn't been poisoned by another person who dumped their waste into the water supply because that was in their individual best interest?
Yeah. So he brought up how I talked about the EPA earlier being something that I would be against, but what about someone polluting your resources because they thought it was in their own best interest? So I think, what's a good way to explain it? There are cases where a company or a person or something who destroys or ruins resources that belong to someone else properly is wrong, but that would fall under a government that properly protects individuals from force. So I believe in a lot more property rights than we have now in terms of environmental regulations, but that doesn't mean anything you want to do is a free-for-all. It means that if there's something where there actually is harm caused to another person, that counts as force. So that can still be properly punished or laws against it and things by a proper government entity. So there doesn't have to be its own agency. It doesn't have to be its own agency of the EPA. There can be just simpler laws carried out by the same police force and things like and court system that we have now that aren't their own monstrous, ever-growing alphabet soup of federal entities.
Like basically have one command and don't be a jerk.
That's a good one. All right, Dan.
So, could you answer this question kind of from both perspectives, the atheist and the
Okay.
conservative side? What would a change that you would like to see be made in the Constitution?
Ooh, good. So the question was prompting me to answer both as an atheist and as a Tea Party about what would I want to see changed in the Constitution. There's not much that I want to change in the Constitution. I wish we would actually use the Constitution. That would be awesome. We have gone really far from that right now. Things I would want to change in the actual Constitution would mostly be like clarifications almost. So especially like the 10th Amendment about everything that we didn't list here belongs to the states and stuff. People don't get that one. We miss it a lot. So like making that stronger would be a good Tea Party thing to do. And on the atheist side, I guess just taking out like creator and stuff. Strengthening the First Amendment, it's a good one.
Creator's not in the Constitution.
Oh, it's in the Declaration. I just got told. Thank you. You're right. Of course. Is there anything in the Constitution that's like... No, I guess not. New person. Probably last question. Sorry, Nick. We can talk after.
My understanding is that you consider both progressivism and religion to be both coercive forces that each one goes against, and that your ideal scenario is an Atlas Shrugged type of society. Do you consider that to be attainable? And if not, would you consider there to be a potential benefit to having both a strong
Really interesting.
Well, I ask this because from what I've noticed, the federal government, it doesn't function that well, but the most functional points in history have come from the Clinton era where you have a Democrat president, yet a Republican Congress, and then back to the Eisenhower era where you have a Republican Congress, yet, or Republican president, yet
Yeah,
a Democrat
yeah.
Congress, that they both end up pulling both ways, and neither side ends up canceling each other out. And further back in history, the whole king versus pope scenario where they both
Yeah.
end up preventing each other from becoming absolute tyrants.
Okay. So the question was about basically, do I see my ideal kind of society as possible? And if not, like, is these opposing forces the next best thing maybe because they kind of cancel each other out? Kind of and kind of. So I don't think in my lifetime, unless we get some really good advances in medicine, that America will see a society that's close to ideal for me, like an Atlas Shrugged type society. I think there's a lot of hope for getting a lot closer. And part of that is just things like Atlas still being ridiculously high-selling novel after almost 60 years, and more interest now than had been previously. So I think there's a lot of hope. I don't think we're going to ultimately get there for a long time. So in some ways,
The library will be closing in 30 minutes. WebLA and the public internet terminals will be closing in 15 minutes.
so in some ways, yeah, having opposing forces in the government that kind of work against each other to stymie each other is actually kind of good for me. I don't want the federal government to be very functional. I like it dysfunctional. It does less then, and I want it to do less, right? So yeah, having forces that don't want to do the same things is good, because it stops them from doing the kind of bad things that I don't want to. That said, I don't just completely want everyone, to be in oppositional forces all the time, because that doesn't really accomplish the goal of why and how we would want a limited federal government. It might have it as kind of a byproduct, but it's not like the right way of doing it. All right, I'm gonna wrap up for now because I only have the room till 8:30, but I will definitely stick around after for personal questions or whatever, and or we can take this out to the bar, get a drink, hang out. Thanks again for coming, everybody.
Atlas Shrugged is the second most read book in the country,
After the Bible.
after the Bible.
I know.
I'd throw that out.
Nice. Thanks for coming. Nice to meet you is what I meant to